So the best experiments are randomized, comparative, double-blind, and placebo-controlled. So when you are designing an experiment, you want to do your best to make sure that all of those aspects are covered in your experiment. Now, sometimes in experiments, we use the idea of blocking. Think about your block schedule, right? You don't do everything all in one day. You break things into chunks to make them more manageable. So blocking is like stratifying your sample. If you remember back to 3.9, when we're talking about stratifying our sample, we're breaking things into groups because they have something in common, and then we're looking at those groups. So stratifying your sample, blocking, here's an example of that in this diagram below. Let's say you're looking at some tomato plants. You got them from 2 different stores, so just to make sure that where you got it, the store that you got it from doesn't have an impact, you might block things into getting things from maybe Target versus Walmart and seeing how those plants differ in their juiciness and tastiness. So you might block them into 2 separate blocks, and then from each block you're going to have a treatment that gets your control, people that get half the dose of some sort of plant growth material, and then people that get the full growth or full dose, and then you're going to look at their juiciness and tastiness. So just to make you aware, that only has 3 treatment groups, not 6, because your treatment groups, my pen's not working, your treatment groups have to deal with, it is really not doing anything. Here we go. 3 treatment groups, not 6, because your treatment group 1 is these 4 plants and these 2 plants, group 2, these and these, group 3, these and these. All right. So your groups are going to have plants from both blocks in them, but blocking them based off the store that you bought them from are going to help you determine whether or not the store had any impact on the growth of the plant. Okay, so an example of blocking in this pet food experiment might be making sure you're blocking for cats and dogs, like putting them into 2 different blocks and then assigning treatment groups, because cats and dogs obviously differ greatly in lots of aspects of their lives. So by blocking from cats and dogs, that way you are making sure that you have the same amount of cats and dogs in every single group, and then your results are not affected by whether or not a cat or a dog ate the food. Alrighty, co-founding. Co-founding is when the levels of one factor are associated with levels of another factor in a way that we cannot separate their effects. We're saying that then those 2 factors are co-founded. We cannot separate the effects from one factor to another. An example of that would be if we are trying to figure out if Tide pods are better than OxiClean laundry detergent, and we put Tide pods in one washing machine and OxiClean in another washing machine. At the end of the experiment, we don't know if Tide pods worked better than OxiClean or not, even just from looking at the clothes, because since we used 2 different washing machines, it could also be that one washing machine was better than the other washing machine. So that's an example of co-founding. The parts of our experiment were not controlled enough for us to differentiate between those 2 factors. An example of co-founding in this is, would it be a bad design to feed the test food to some cats and the safe food to some dogs, and the safe food to cats? That would be co-founding, because then we wouldn't know if that food affected cats in the same way that it affected dogs. We don't know about differences in the animal health and all sorts of those things. So that is co-founding, because we're not controlling for our other variables in our experiment. All right, almost done with notes. I appreciate you for bearing with me on these. Lurking variables. A variety of variables may be influencing the situation. Sometimes isolating the effect of one variable may be difficult. There may be lurking variables that we need to think about. So lurking variables might be, and we've used this example a little bit ago, but talking about how the amount of ice cream sold increases at the same time that the murder rate increases in a city. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that the ice cream and the murder rate have an impact on each other. There's probably a lurking variable. In this case, maybe the weather. When the weather is nicer, more people are out getting ice cream, but also more people are out for some reason committing crimes. So that's just one example of a lurking variable. There are obviously many, many other examples. So just be aware of confounding variables or lurking variables when you are designing your experiment. Just because you're looking for one specific factor doesn't mean that there aren't other factors that are playing a part in your experiment. And finally, before we conclude, determining whether or not things are ethical, that is sometimes hard. Okay. Is it ethical to experiment on animals? That might be a personal question for you. We currently in the United States have a ethics board for approval where your researchers have to submit their research ideas and get approval from the ethics board before they can actually conduct experiments, because we don't want to risk people's lives unnecessarily. And some things may be painful, some things might give you some psychological stress or some mental stress or emotional stress. So the ethics of experiments, we have an ethics board in our country that approves ideas, but it is up for debate as to whether or not things are ethical, and it has to do with your own moral compass and kind of your tolerance for people being a part of an experiment. So I will leave you with that. Deciding whether or not things are ethical is more of a personal decision. I mean, some things are obviously unethical, but for the most part, you're looking at, are you okay with how you are designing an experiment? And then obviously, however you design your experiment does need to be approved by an ethics board before you can actually conduct your experiment, because not everyone has the same moral compass. So that is the end of our notes for section 310. We were learning all about observational studies and experiments. I really appreciate you guys sticking with me if you made it through all these videos. I do know some of these were longer videos than intended. I would have, if we were doing this in class, split these notes up over 2 days because they were a little bit longer, but because we are now doing this distance learning phase, I wanted you to learn the whole section just in one assignment block that I'm giving you. So here are your notes for today's lesson. If you go on Schoology, you'll notice that your only assignment for today is to complete the My Math Lab that goes along with this lesson. If you watched my video explaining kind of what to expect for distance learning, you will probably be getting some other sorts of materials to work on as we move forward in this, but I wanted to ease you guys into this by just giving you my math lab assignments, especially because I know you're seniors. I know you're devastated right now because things are up in the air and you're not sure how your year is going to end, and I want to be accommodating with that. And then I also know a lot of you are in very demanding other courses. So I'm not intending on making your stats homework take a significant amount of time or anything. I do know that you have other classes that are super, super important that you're going to want to make sure you're focusing on during this distance learning phase. So this is the end of your notes for stats. Again, your only assignment is the My Math Lab assignment on Schoology. There's nothing you need to post on Schoology. Just do it on My Math Lab like normal and we'll be good to go. If you have any questions as we're going through this, please, please, please feel free to contact me. Hopefully you know my email by now. If not, it's ctaylor@moderndaycatholic.org. And then I also have a discussion post on your stats Schoology page if you have any questions that you would like to ask in public that other students can see the answers to. When you're emailing me, just please try to remember that you do still need to be including your parents on the email. That way we are following our guidelines set by our school. Alrighty guys, thanks for sticking with me. Hopefully you enjoyed our notes for today. Good luck on your homework in this class and in all of your classes, and I look forward to seeing what all you guys do over these next couple days. See ya!